Hey everyone, I'm back. I'm going to continue the series and the stories of my experiences in the secret space program. Yesterday's video, or the last video I did a quick overview of my experience and of the 60 years that I was actually gone. And I mentioned that I will come back in that video, that I'll come back and give details in other videos. And so that's what I'm going to do. In this video, I'm going to talk to you guys and explain some of what happened when they took me at 2 years old in 1970 from my parents' house and the process. And I mentioned in that video that they have an age progression, an age advancing technology. I say they, meaning some of the factions of the secret space program and some of the military complexes here on Earth have this technology. Now, what happened with me, as I said in the last video, I'll kind of go over it a little bit. Again, I was 2 years old in 1970, and I was in my crib, in my room, and in this, well, it was a room off of the living room. And my parents were in the living room watching television. And I was standing in my crib holding on to the little bars of it and kind of looking over, I believe, looking over the top rail, trying to watch TV. And I believe it was Outer Limits, if I recall. But anyway, so there I am standing there, and suddenly my view is blocked because there's a man standing in front of me. He just popped in. And he was in all dark blue, sort of like what a military casual blues, the dark navy blues, but no distinguishing marks except for his hat. Now, I remember very little about him at first. Later on in my experiences, he became my handler. What I mean by that is that's your point of contact would generally always be the same person. Whether you're in the service and you're on another planet or on a ship or on Earth, you have someone that knows everything about you and is basically your boss, for lack of a better term. So anyway, and I don't remember his name at all. I'm terrible with names. That's the one thing that's so bad. I'm very, very visual person. So I see pictures, I see video, I see things that I remember. And then my memories come in as emotion first and then actual visual. But very little technical information for the most part. So this man pops in, blocking my view of the door, so all I can see is him standing in front of me, and he reaches in to the crib and picks me up under the shoulders, kind of holds me out as if he didn't really want to be doing this or didn't want to be touching me or whatever. And the next thing I know, and this is a 2-year-old brain, so I had to go back later and I asked questions and some of the answers came in that way. Ask questions of my actual superiors, of my handler himself, and he would tell me details of things that they did after the fact, many years later. And so he picked me up, took me out of the crib, and suddenly we were in a flash, at least in my perspective, we were walking down a bright hallway. So we're just walking for a distance, I don't know how long. And then suddenly we went into a room. Okay, well, maybe not sudden, but we're walking down the hall. He's carrying me out in front of him and trying not to make eye contact, from what I recall. And then we get to a doorway, and he kind of goes in the doorway, and there's this space. Now the hallway is kind of long and white, but also had like a green tint to it, like a mint, like a really light minty green tint, but it might have been the lighting, which was probably fluorescent, I don't know. So we're walking down the hall, and he goes into this room, and he kind of backs in with me, and then turns around, And then, but I could see as he's backing in, I could see past him. And this looked like a hospital room or a laboratory or something like that. Like I said, the 2-year-old brain didn't take a whole lot in at that time, especially because I was quite frightened, and I was cold. Seemed like I was always cold. But so anyway, he hands me over to this female, and she would be a nurse or a doctor or a lab tech or something to that effect. And I do recall that I feel like she had like a lab coat or some sort of smock or something. I don't remember exactly what it looked like. It was just kind of plain. And then she also had on like something partially covering her hair. It was like a rag tied or, whatever. Almost like what some doctors wear. Put on a cap and they tie the back of it. It's sort of like that, I guess. But it was also white. And anyway, so she takes me and she undresses me, which I only had I think maybe on a little shirt and a diaper, or I don't know if it was a diaper or a pair of pants or what they were, I don't know. She took them off and then she wiped me down with what would be like handy wipes today, what we would call, wet naps or something to that effect. And I'm assuming that that's because of wanting to kill the bacteria on the surface of my skin. And I remember she wiped my face down and she wiped everything down. And then she took me over to a few steps over and kind of held me over this tank thing. She was holding me under my arms as well. And the difficulty of this was quite a bit, in sharing this information, just because it was really emotional. And I remember the terror and the fear and all of the emotions that I was having in this little 2-year-old mind. So she takes me to this tank. Now this tank is sort of like, it's round, but it's on its side like a cylinder, if you have a round aquarium standing up, and you lay it on its side. And it was not much bigger than me at the time. So, and it was partially filled with this pink liquid, which of course I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what this was. I knew nothing. But she takes me and she places me in this fluid. And then her hand was pretty large on my chest. So she put her hand, so she laid me like face up, setting me into it. And then she put her hand on top of my body, my torso, and pushed me under. And then she pushed me all the way to the bottom of the tank, which was only, several inches deep, enough to cover me. And then she compressed my chest. And when she compressed my chest, it pushed out all the air, which caused me to take a breath in. Now that breath in, of course, is this gel. It's like a lavender purple sort of gel. It's nothing like gelatin. It's more like just viscous water, but it had like a sort of gravy quality to it, I guess. It was thin enough that you could breathe it in and to get into your lungs. So that's what I did. Of course, I breathed in. And I don't remember much except for the fear and looking up at her. I do remember that, looking into her eyes. And I don't know what her expression was, except it was just blank. Like she was doing what she had to do, and it wasn't like evil or that she was enjoying it or anything like that. It was just, I don't remember an expression. So she did this compression, and then all of the air came out of my lungs. I breathed in, and it burned to breathe in. And it was a bit of a struggle because I'm not breathing in air. I'm now breathing in this liquid. And I breathed it in, and it was, I just remember it being really terrifying. And it was somewhat of an anesthetizing quality, I found out later, this gel has. So you don't really feel pain, even though it burned. It kind of numbed everything once it got in there. And then I realized after a second or two of just trying to fight her off, that I could breathe, or at least I could get oxygen anyway. And I felt like that my body was taking in oxygen from this gel and that my lungs were taking in oxygen. So it was a bit of a struggle. It wasn't as easy as air, but I was okay. I could handle it at that time, is at least what I was feeling. So unfortunately, this gel also was something they had to flush out my whole system, meaning my intestinal system. I don't know how long that process took. I just remember, for the most part, I don't know if it was an enema or if it was just a reaction of my body just expelling everything, but everything that was in me food-wise came out. Well, of course, that made the fluid fairly, dirty and unusable. And so they flushed the tank out almost immediately, and then they refilled it. And I don't know how that worked exactly. I don't know how long that took, but it couldn't have been long because my lungs were full of this fluid, and then suddenly I was in fluid again. And I don't know if it was partially because of my fear, not understanding time or what was happening, but that was pretty much what happened. They flushed everything out. My lungs are now filled with this fluid, and I'm floating in it. Now, what is the fluid? I don't know what it's called. I just know that it's some sort of the closest thing I can consider it to be like T cells or something to the effect of building blocks of material, of the physical body material. And they got this technology and this gel, which apparently is very expensive, from another race of beings. And they traded something for it, who knows what. And when I say they, again, I'm referring to the military complex of the United States. And they kept this gel. And what it is, this gel has to be connected to your DNA. So somehow, somewhere, they had a sample of my DNA and were able to grow this gel based on my DNA so that I was compatible with it and my body wouldn't reject it while I'm submerged in it. And that DNA is, and then whatever else is in that gel, the building blocks of life or material, is actually all in there together. So now what they have to do, and this was the worst part of it, I couldn't only be submerged in this gel because I wouldn't grow at a proper rate. So whatever would be exposed, the lungs, the skin, parts of my body that were touching the gel would grow quickly, but then my internal organs and my bones and such would not grow at that same rate. They also needed to have that gel directly in them. And how they did that, not pleasant. But because don't forget, I'm in this round, horizontally lying round tube. And all the way around this tube were these little rubber, like stopper things, like a hole in a barrel, that had a rubber stopper in it. But they were a bunch of them, I don't know, dozens, all the way around it. So now they put in these little rubber, stoppers, or I think they're also called bunghole type of things. They're able to slide large needles into them, into the tank. And so that's what they began doing. They began putting needles into my body, in different parts of my body, in my joints that I recall, like in my joints, in my head, temples, and this couple in the spine area, and then in the major organs, to get that gel inside my body. So now I'm fully suspended, this 2-year-old, fully suspended in this purple gel, in this round tank thing, but suspended by needles all the way around. Obviously not pleasant. But again, this gel has an anesthetizing quality, so it wasn't pain, it was discomfort, it was terror. but it wasn't pain. So that's at least there's that, right? So then they kept me in there. Now after this, after the needles and all went in, I don't really have any memories until apparently what was a few weeks later. I was let out. Now that tank, I had to be moved at some point into a larger tank type of thing, and that tank is the one that I remained in. The first one was to get things started, I guess, and then I grew a little bit, and then stabilized, make sure everything was okay, I'm assuming, and then they moved me into a larger tank because this growth gel causes the body to grow rapidly. Now, rapidly is 4 or 5 weeks that I recall. I just don't remember how long it was, but it took a few weeks for everything to grow till I was like a 25-ish, mid-20s young man. And so like I said, I have no memories of after all those needles went in when I was the 2-year-old, but until later when they were flushing the tank, I had a consciousness of it, of the large tank, and then I remember being taken out. I remember the needles coming out. That may be a separate thing. It may have been before they flushed the tank. I think it actually was. I remember all the needles being pulled out. So the needles are all being pulled out, and then sometime later, whenever that is, then they flushed the tank. And then I was, next thing that I was aware of really was I was on a gurney or a hospital bed crying like a little baby, because I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what was going on. I was scared. Again, I was cold. And it turns out that even though you grow the body, obviously, the mind is still a 2-year-old mind. The memories and the experiences of a 2-year-old. So here I am in mid-20s with the mind of a 2-year-old. So I spent probably a couple of days or so traumatized and crying. So after that process, after I had calmed down and things were okay and I was stabilized, then the next step for them was to unlock my memories. And they did do that. Excuse me. They did do that. And they do that with different types of devices. One particular device was used, and the thing about memories is that they're locked into your DNA. And when you know how to access that frequency of the DNA, then memories can be accessed. And the accessed memories they're all there. They're all in your DNA, but they have to just simply be unlocked. And when you have the technology to do that, that's not a hard thing to do. Can I explain exactly how it works? Not really. Just know that memories are DNA locked and that they can be unlocked with right technology. That's why you hear of transplant patients, especially people that have received a heart from someone that has died, and then the heart is transplanted into them, and then they start craving the same foods that person craved, and they start having memories and dreams that person lived. That's because of the memories are locked in the DNA of that heart or of that other organ, and it's the same way. So they work with the pineal gland. Now the pineal gland is a very small little pea-sized thing, really, in the center of our brain. And each pineal gland has calcite crystals growing inside of it. And this is a good thing. We want this because what happens is there's the CSF, the cerebral spinal fluid, that's also in that region. And I don't know if it's inside. I believe it's inside the pineal gland as well, but don't quote me on that part. But anyway, what the pineal gland does is put hydraulic pressure on those calcite crystals, which is just, pressure from fluids that press down into these calcite crystals in the pineal gland. Now, what happens when you put stress or pressure on a crystal, especially quartz, which calcite is a form of quartz, or quartz is a form of calcite. They're very similar materials. They're both silica. So when you put pressure on these types of crystals, you create an energy. And that energy is piezoelectric energy. And that's the energy that our nervous system uses and that our brain uses for its electrical synapses. And the nervous system uses it for communication with the brain, and all the organs that are connected to that system all use piezoelectric energy. Now that energy, it has a frequency. So every person's pineal gland is slightly different. It grows a little bit different. The calcite crystals are more individual from one person to the other, and they're different. They grow differently, grow different shapes, just like fingerprints. Things are different for every single human being. Now, the pressure when the pineal gland puts on these crystals not only creates piezoelectric energy, but it creates a vibration, a frequency. And that is the signature frequency of the individual. And just like I said, everybody has a slightly different frequency. Now, there are many, many, many frequencies, pretty much an infinity of frequency levels. With the right technology, you can actually tune into these frequencies. They're slightly different, but they are different from one person to the other. So that is your signature as a human being. That's your signature frequency. And they exploit this. The military exploits this because when they know your frequency, they can tap into the pineal gland, and that they can erase memory that way, and they can actually transfer your consciousness, your soul, because they're all connected. They can transfer it if they know your frequency. They have the technology to do that. And so after I'm laying there for 2 days crying like a little baby, as a 25-year-old man, they go in there and they already know my frequency because they've already measured that before, and it's in my file. As in with every single person that's in these programs, they all have a file, and that information's in there. So they go in there and they unlock with the frequency. There's a series of tones, and these different types of tones create vibrational. It's basically it almost forces your pineal gland to respond in a way, so there's different frequencies in there. So they basically come in and unlock your memories. Like I said earlier, I don't know exactly how it works. I can't describe how my cell phone works, but I know it works. I know how to use it. And it's the same thing with this technology as well. So they unlocked my memories. Now, I then remembered that I had agreed to do this. I had agreed to be a part of the secret space program prior to being incarnate, prior to being born. I made arrangements for this to happen because of my primary goal for myself and my soul family was to represent humanity during this evolutionary phase that we're in. To come in here and bring information, share information, and to help people remember who they are, to wake up and to evolve. This is all about the Earth evolving into full fourth density and about humanity and human beings evolving with the Earth into a full fourth density experience. Fundamental religion I grew up in, we refer to this as the New Earth. So we came to be a part of the beginning of the New Earth, and that's what we're in now. That's why we have all of this dissension and fighting and craziness, and it's just all odd and weird, but it's part of the transitional phase, and we can talk some more about it. You guys let me know if you want to hear more about that, more about the New Earth. It's outside of my personal experience, but it's my understanding and what I remember from coming from being out in off planet, and so that's basically the beginning of my experience. Now, I did spend 20 years in the service of the United States, and I worked at wherever I was there, which I don't recall where I was. I feel like it was probably some underground base somewhere or something. But I do also recall working on the surface of the earth out in the deserts. I can only assume it's the United States Southwest because that's pretty much what it looks like, but I don't know that for sure. But we were working on a base, a small base, where I was a guard. Now this base had it's like one large building on the left-hand side, and that building, as I recall, was all like where everybody slept. It was all the barracks, and also a kitchen and facilities for staying there, for people staying there. And on the other side, kind of like in a wagon circle sort of thing, were three buildings, and they were kind of in a slightly angled one from the other, so it created this like half moon sort of shape. And the first building, from the south side, because it was the buildings were oriented south to north or north to south. So the southernmost building would have been the infirmary, I believe. That might have been the second building, but I believe it was the first building was the infirmary. And then the next building was like administrative kind of stuff. And then the third building, the most northerly building, was a classroom, kind of a classroom of horror, actually. And apparently the experiments that were going on in there, torture that was going on in there, was on young people. And it was really incredibly hard to watch. I was never allowed in the room when there were young people in the room, mostly younger boys, 9 to 12-ish. I was never really allowed in there then, because when you would open the front door, there was a wall blocking you. You couldn't see in, though you could see and smell everything, which was awful. Don't want to get disgusting about it, but there was some experimenting going on with these young kids. And I just remember one time specifically, there was a young man. I was called over, and it was not really hot, even though it was the desert. It wasn't like super hot, so it must have been a good time of the year. But I would basically patrol back and forth from the north, going north-south. And between the big building on the left and the three smaller buildings on the right-hand side, facing north, was just gravel, like large, fairly 1 or 2 inch size, broken up rocks. And when you walk on that, you have that crunchy kind of sound. That's something I really remember because I'm visceral that way, visually and sound and auditory, that kind of stuff I tend to remember. And I remember walking in my boots to go because I was called to the classroom. And as I recall, I called it the classroom, but I wouldn't have called it that. And so I opened the front door, and there's this young man standing right there, and you can tell he's not well. He's probably 10 or 11. And so I get him to come out the door, and I close the door, and we start walking back. And in my soul, I felt for this young kid, because I was never told anything. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know that they were slaved kids or they were super special kids that were there. I didn't know. It didn't feel right. Didn't feel good, but I didn't know what was going on. And I carry a lot of guilt because of that, even though I know that there's nothing I could have done. In my way, I do remember feeling and thinking, even if it's for a moment, show love and kindness to these kids. And so on the way back, he was really sick. And we're walking back and we're crunching on those stones. And he gets really sick. And he stops. And I come around the front of him. I kind of get down on my knees. And I'm like, are you okay? And I know he's not, but, are you okay? And I kind of have my hands on his shoulders and he vomits. And I try to back off, of course, So he gets on my boots and my pants and stuff. And I just remember looking in his eyes and I said, it's okay. Don't worry about it. And I said, I'm so sorry that you're having this experience. I'm so sorry. And that was it. I remember bringing him into the infirmary, and that was it. That was the last of that memory. So there's a lot of things, that I had to do that I didn't necessarily want to do in those first 20 years. I also took erased memory from soldiers when they would come in and they were traumatized. They had come in from a battle, they had seen horrific things, and some of them were begging me, please take it. So I could take out those blocks of memories, because how memory works is it's based on a timestamp of a time wave, and they can go in and tell the computer when to start removing the memory from the DNA, deleting the frequency, dissolving the frequency basically, and when to end it. Now, but everything in that time period goes. So if it's from 8 a.m. one day to 8 p.m. that day, that whole 12 hours is taken away. You can't pick and choose. You can't cherry pick memories. Not that I was ever aware of or that I recall. So they would come in and we would, if they were gone for 3 days and it was a horrific 3 days, we would just take those 3 days. And then they would be, much better. It's like, I kind of wish we were doing that now with certain types of PTSD. Why can't we use this technology, to be helpful? I know we will. We will be using it soon. It's just super frustrating when you can see something work so beautifully to help people and humanity, and we're not using it. And that's why I brought the Deems device into the world. That was the one thing I told them. I said, I want to release that to humanity. And of course they said, absolutely not a problem. They were going to give me millions of dollars for retirement, a bunch of other things. They basically didn't tell me I wouldn't remember, or they did tell me all the time I wouldn't remember, and I would argue the fact that, well, I will remember, and I have, fortunately. It's been a difficult journey remembering, but, I do remember, so I did a lot of work, and that's where I learned about the fact that humans have the ability to heal themselves. We just got to connect to the earth, use the energy of the earth, and heal ourselves. And that's what the Deems device does. That's what these are up here. Where are we at? There we are. Those two guys. So that's this came directly out of the secret space program. And that's why when I did the first 40 years, and then I needed to every 20 years you renegotiated the contract. So at the end of the first 40 years, I was renegotiating my contract with my handler. I remember it specifically. That's when I said I wanted to freely release the Deems device and possibly other technology. And they said, well, absolutely, sure, not a problem. You're not going to remember anyway. Well, yeah, I am. So we argued about it quite a bit. But I did... Excuse me. Sorry about that, guys. I did remember, and I have remembered. So that's the next chapter in my story. I may touch base on that a little bit in the future on some other stories, but that's how, when I was a 2-year-old, I was age advanced and made, my memories unlocked, and I worked for the U.S. government for the first 20 years. Here on Earth, mostly, that I recall. And the next episode, we'll get into where I went next, which was the first moon off of out of the rings of Saturn, called Mimas. That's actually a space station. And I'll tell you all about that next time. Okay? Love you guys. Bye-bye.